Hey, welcome to the MemSQL No Show. I'm technology correspondent Lisa Martin. Today, talking about monster data with the one and only Jim Sinur. I'm sure many of you know Jim. He's the CEO of Fluersque. He's also an artist. Jim, I'm so pleased to be talking with you this morning.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm really excited about talking about monster data. It seems to be an appropriate topic around Halloween.
Absolutely, it does. It does. If only it was a friendly monster, but you're going to talk to us about how it can be. So, in the next 15 minutes, Jim and I are going to chat essentially about three things. He's going to define monster data, what it is, how to prioritize it. Then he's going to talk about data quality and specifically when good enough data is good enough. Then we're going to talk about the database of now and technologies like MemSQL and get Jim's opinion on how technologies like MemSQL can help customers manage their monster data. All right, Jim, let's attack the first thing. Monster data from your perspective, what is it?
Well, we already have big data, so we understand that there's a capacity issue. Monster data takes that capacity issue and basically makes it at least tenfold. It's an order of magnitude or more. And so it's like big data, except much, much bigger. And that comes from, data at the edge, IoT data, data from new contexts that we haven't had to look at before because we were only focused on our own organization. So it has a volume piece to it. The monstrosity really comes from its complexity and from its, not being perfect or it's dirty. So monster data is multiple data forms. It's not just operational data. It's not just management data and tactical data. It's voice, it's video, it's image, it's speech, it's text. It's all of those mixed together and used in essence in a broker fashion where you can use all of those together in an equal basis. So an example is listening to your customers, seeing what they're saying when you're on the pause button or even the live button and using AI to interpret it, for instance. The other is data is not going to be as clean as we like it. I, in my past life, worked in data management areas, and we were always looking for the perfect operational data so we could optimize for the company mostly, and frankly, driven a lot by our CPAs and our accountants to make sure that we were saving and making money. So monster data is, three-headed at least, and it may expand as time goes on as we start getting let's say signals from nano devices that are implanted in people's bodies. That may be a special kind of IoT data.
So it's we're talking about at least a three-headed monster, organizations consuming data, generating it from so many sources. How do you advise companies to prioritize it? What are some of the considerations that they really need to take to heart?
Yeah, we have to do something different than we did with big data. Big data, we tried to save it all. We tried to put it in data lakes. We tried to put it in knowledge pools. We tried all kinds of things to store it and save it because we might use it. You can't do that this time. So what you have to do is really be clear on your goals. And the goals could shift depending upon which scenario you are in. If you're in a hyperinflation scenario or a hyper disinflation scenario or a COVID scenario, your goals will shift. But focusing the data on the goals and taking care of the data that relates to the goals of the moment is what you really want to focus on. That's number one. Number two, you want to focus in on channels of change. Where are you likely to sense your change? When you look at contexts that might be in your industry, in your market, amongst your customers, amongst your best customers, where are you likely to sense the change? It could be you're sensing a change in an economy in China, or maybe even in Singapore, that might affect one of the scenarios that you've planned for and you have on the shelf. If you don't have it planned for and on the shelf, then you're going to find yourself in a react mode, kind of like we did with COVID, to be honest with you.
Can a change channel also be something like something happening with your competitors?
Absolutely. It could be in your community or your competitors. And I think it's important to look at the change channels that you're used to, that you're closest to, and prioritize those, because that's where you're used to getting the signals and the patterns that will say, hey, look, there could be a potential change here that could affect you. So you look at a change channel, and then you look at data sources that are highly used. People will automatically go to the best data for getting what they want done. So having some kind of hotspot monitoring to spot the data that gets the highest level of use. So we did that for an organization that I was in, and surprise, surprise, it was the accounting data. Number one. Number two was the customer data. Surprise, surprise. But in today's world, you will get some surprises.
Yeah, I think all of us are probably headed up to here with surprises, but you're right, they're coming regardless. If you're just tuning in, Lisa Martin with Jim Sinur talking about managing monster data. Let's move on to topic 2, Jim, and that's data quality. I've read a number of your blogs where a lot of folks, depending on the situation, say we've got to have the data cleansed. It's got to be absolutely perfect before we make a decision. But we also know, especially the climate in which we're living, that things have to be done immediately and we can't wait for perfection. Can you talk to us about your definition of data quality and then walk us through some of the scenarios that you recommend customers take to analyze how what they would know what needs to be perfect and what's good enough is good enough?
Yeah. And what we're looking for is good enough data for the context. So if you're talking about sharp operational data that you're making significant legal decisions on, and that you're governing very carefully, that data needs to be more near perfect, because you don't want to be called into court, for making a bad decision, or let's say biasing against a certain class of customers, for instance, or prospects. So the operational data needs to be more perfect, but we've been working with that data for a long, long time. The other data that is coming in that is less perfect is the change channels. There's certain things that are happening. You're picking up a signal. That signal or the pattern is making a manager or a piece of technology aware that something unusual is happening. So we need to really investigate it. That data will not be perfect. So what you may have to do in that case is go out and get more data sources so you can clarify that signal, clarify that pattern, to find out maybe we need to adjust our rules. We're in hyperinflation, and maybe we need to slow things down so we can pay out cheaper dollars, and maybe we speed up our collections by giving our customers incentives. So those are some tactics that will tune our operational systems to do better. In fact, where you see hyperinflation, people stand in line to pay their bills. So we know for a fact that we can adjust our rules in our operational systems and in our management analytics so that we can do better overall as an organization for ourselves and for all of our constituents.
What's the, I was going to ask you about like the average number of data sources for an enterprise. What number are we looking at here?
Well, I think, and I worked for some very large mega companies in American Express and Northwestern Financial Network, and we literally had hundreds moving into thousands of data sources. I think in tomorrow's world, you're going to have devices on the edge sending you data. These devices on the edge might be making decisions for your company within constraints. So you multiply that by things that are on the edge, and it may be their geopolitical, not their geolocation. Excuse me for the slip there. And you might want to know what context they're in, and so you're going to get more data. So I would say the data points go from hundreds to tens of thousands. And if we start getting into more, nanotechnology that's embedded everywhere, it may even go higher than that. But I'd have to have a big, crystal ball to say look, it's going to be hundreds of thousands.
Well, but to your point, it's massive. That's hence monster. And it's only going to get bigger. So if we in our last topic here kind of talk about the database of now and how technologies like MemSQL can help organizations to manage this, let's just kind of recircle back. You said you defined importantly with respect to monster data, and you also identified how it's different than big data. If, in case you missed it, you can watch the replay. You said you've got to prioritize. You've got to prioritize the data. You've also got to prioritize the change channels and look at some of the influences, set measures, look at data quality, determine when circumstances demand perfect data and the circumstances that don't. So with that in mind, from a MemSQL perspective, how do you see companies using this technology to allow them to manage their monster data?
Well, MemSQL is an example of the database of now, where you're looking at business moments. And we all know that the business moments make a big difference in winning and losing business, winning and losing customers. So the ability to do things extremely fast with data from various sources in the cloud, not in the cloud. MemSQL gives you a ability to, in essence, integrate the data, make it ready, make it available, and make it now. So where you see that most helpful is when you're trying to get a status. So you'll see it probably start in an organization, at the dashboard level, dashboard operational level, which is very practical, and you're going to see the benefits. But what MemSQL does is it gives you the ability to have all your data available to you as fresh as it can be, as high quality as it can be within your tolerances, make it available so that you can make split-second decisions or say, look, we have to look at this more strategically, so let's run some simulations and say, hey, look, we've got a hurricane headed our way and we're a hospital. Have we practiced our ability to move patients and ability to exit the building? Those are the kinds of things that data might say. So you say, well, I've got a hurricane headed my way. That's a piece of data. And maybe I need to practice my operations a little bit better for an escape plan.
So that's a great example of real-time need. And I think another thing that demonstrated that was COVID. 2020, the hindsight year, we're going to learn so much, right? We can kind of laugh at it now, laugh and cry at the same time. But in that scenario that you just gave, the hospital, the hurricane, we look at monster data in the context of COVID. I'd love to, you said you didn't have a crystal ball, not so sure about that, but give us the scenario of where the ability to evaluate data in real time, the data of now, take data from multiple sources, like, GPS data from parking lots in Wuhan, for example, from last October. What's your perspective if we had the ability to do that? Would this situation have been prevented or dramatically different?
I think we could have taken steps earlier and we could have taken smart steps. So if we would have looked at data from other areas of the world that have dealt with pandemics successfully. Now, I happen to be an international flyer. I know for years that the Asian airlines, if you go into a plane, you're going to find over half the population in that airplane with masks on. Had we had that knowledge and to know how successful that was, that would have helped us. Also, if we would have been able to watch the spread of the coronavirus, if we had instant data, if we had the testing data, and we're getting our hands around that for our own population, but we're kind of behind the curve. We have 4% of the population of the world, and we have 20% of the fatalities. That says to me that that's a missed opportunity. And we could have acted with data smartly, better. And I'm not blaming any one person or any one party. We just got caught flat-footed using management by exception principles, saying things are going to run smoothly and let's only pay attention to those things that are going to affect our bottom line. We can't do that anymore. We have to have scenarios. I worked for a company that had 120 different scenarios, and they would point to the code where those things might have to change. So if it was a hyperinflation, these were the if statements, the code that had to change. If it was a pandemic and it was a life insurance company and we're betting, life insurance companies betting that you're going to live, and as a policyholder, you're betting that you're going to die, and anything that tips that bet one way or the other will affect pricing, will affect the underwriting rules. So having all those scenarios on the shelf, and I think our country does that very well with war games only. We're really good at war games. We need to have war games for the things that happen to our population. We need to have games in our company that plan out scenarios. Now, we had a full-fledged corporate planning department with 15 people looking at scenarios, emerging scenarios. It didn't start at 120, it started at 15 to 20, and we started looking at where the code would have to change. We might not know what the change is, but we know what had to change.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing from you is that the technology is there to enable this. Is that correct?
It is there to enable us if we can manage the monster data. And I think the technology is emerging to manage monster data. We've got examples that helped us with big data, but now we need to take it a level further. We need to be able to balance things in the cloud, move it in the cloud, integrate it in the cloud, translate it in the cloud, sense it in the cloud, and be able to shift resources as we need them, and affect rules in our procedures and policies and applications and systems. And yeah, we have a lot of the technology. I mean, that company was doing that 30 years ago. So they were doing it with older technology. So yes, it can be done with the right management perspective. But these new technologies like the database now just make it so much better and so much more complete and so much more aware and so much more in the moment so that we can win in situations where we need to.
We'll look for that in 2021. Jim, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. I know we could keep chatting, but if you have any questions for Jim, we're going to put his email address per his permission in the LinkedIn chat. He'd be happy to answer any of your questions. Jim, great to see that you're well. Thank you so much for joining us on the No Show today.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the chance to talk. As you can tell, I'm very reticent.
Right. You're shy. We need to get you out of your shell.
Exactly.
Me too. And for those of you watching, next Tuesday, the 27th of October, 5 days from now, the Revolution event, MemSQL's event, we're going live with some big news. Again, that's Tuesday, October 27th. You won't want to miss it. We'll see you soon.